esteemed and venerable representatives of different religious traditions and faiths, Your Excellency, the President of Sri Lanka, Your Excellency, the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, Your Excellency, the former President of Sri Lanka, the Honorable Speaker, the Honorable Acting Chief Justice, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of Parliament, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. I commence by expressing my deep gratitude to His Excellency the President for inviting me to this important landmark event. There is a saying in Tamil about the tiny cylindrical rice measure called the arak. The saying smiles at the arak, the small cylindrical rice measure, for imagining that it has an east and a west. Arakil kirakku merku. Well, whether this little arak has directions or not, islands have directions. Sri Lanka has directions. And directions are about places and about paths. We can say today that Sri Lanka knows its directions, it knows its paths, and is walking with steadiness on that path which its people have charted for it. And so I offer my felicitations on the first anniversary of the Government of National Unity to Sri Lanka in its multi-directioned roundness. I offer felicitations to its north and its south, its east and its west, and to its central highlands, where under the shade of the Sri Dalada Maligava, I spent 4 deeply formative years. The government headed by you, Mr. President, and with you, Mr. Prime Minister, at its executive helm, has sought to bring together all of Sri Lanka's Desava and its sacred Madhyasthanaka. But it has also done more. It has not just given to itself, but to the whole of South Asia, something that was thought impossible of achievement, but which has been achieved by the good sense of Sri Lanka's far-sighted people. It's Mudirnda Makkal, it's Durdakana Aya, and which, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, is the replacement of fear, of beer, by confidence, of Vishwasaya, the replacement of suspicion, mutual suspicion, Sandeham, by trust, Nambikai. The idea of a joint SLFP-UNP government, bringing 2 traditionally opposed parties together, with one of them pitted against one of its own leaders, none other than the president of the day, was thought oxymoronic beyond description, a contradiction within an impossibility, a naivete within a hallucination, as absurd, say, as a tembili growing on a mango tree, or an iyalamai in Tamil, or a manakalpita vikara. But such a coalescence was seen not just by incurable cynics, but even by experienced observers as a poetic fantasy, until what was regarded as out of the question became a reality, an out-of-the-box reality. And as the call of the pioneers spread, the integrated will of the people of Sri Lanka drew out reconciliation from revenge, dialogue from division, peace from war, and indeed, at the cost of sounding platitudinous, life from death. If there is one nation, aside from Afghanistan, where the phrases war and peace, life and death have been as real as the breath in our lungs, it is Sri Lanka. Countless people in this land have lived and continue to live under the specter of death. They have felt its cold hand, with many carrying scars on and shrapnel in their limbs. Some of them who in what is called active public life are here, and they have chosen paths that will always be log-jammed with peril. I use every word with deliberation and with admiration. I salute and celebrate their guts and their wit. And above this, I celebrate and share the sense of relief, the utter relief Sri Lanka felt and Sri Lanka's friends felt at being pulled back from the brink. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I will speak today a few words with what can only be called frankness. Sri Lanka stood last year on nothing less and nothing less dangerous than a precipice. It stood on what in Tamil is called Vilambil. Its people brought their motherland back from that precipice, from that edge of disaster. But to what exactly? They intended clearly to bring it back not to the old hearths of mutual suspicion, but to a new threshold of continuing an incremental trust. Incremental is the crucial word here. Coalitions are as old as opportunism. Sandarpavadam. Political alliance can be as stale as cunning. Tandaram. Every country, every generation, and nowhere more in South Asia has known political collusions contrived in haste only to collapse in a trice because deceit is two-edged. Both partners in the politics of coalition are first divisioners in its art, postdocs in its science. But in the matter of Vishwase or Nambike, they are still in kindergarten, Madalayar Palli or Balamsha, and they do not want to leave that kindergarten. But Sri Lanka, in fact, particularly has a telling phrase for arrangements in smartness. It is called cutting deals. That is done in the hastening shadows of dusk, where the face conceals what the hand deals till the real day the truth reveals. But unbelievably, a year ago, Sri Lanka did something that was not about cutting deals. It was about cutting egos, personal egos, party egos. And even in the last 15 minutes that I have been here, I can see how egos have been cut by people, how pride has been trimmed by great leaders. I do not have to recite the sequence, but I would like to dwell on its meaning. The players involved who are present here today, one the Honorable President, the other the Honorable Prime Minister, with the former President here, a former Prime Minister here. They were taking a risk. They were courting an enormous risk, an abath. The issue was, of course, trust. Plain Vishwasa, simple Nambike. But the plain and the simple do not come plain and the simple, they come very complicated. If the players trusted too little, they could lose even before they started. But if they trusted too much and the trust was betrayed, they could lose more than their political futures. President Sirisena and Prime Minister Wickramasinghe, when they decided to start on their risk-ridden path with the mature support of former President Chandrika Bandaranayake Kumaratunga, were confident. But somewhere in their minds, they must have also been prepared for defeat. And not just defeat, but more than defeat. Today is the exact anniversary of Lasantha Wickramatunga's death. Need I say more? When those who trust, like the three leaders I have mentioned, trust, they step beyond the politics of the predictable into the margin of the unknown, of a future that could either be a farce or become a force. They acted in faith. They are all present here today, and I salute them. They acted in faith and became a force, and a force for change. Not just the change that comes from modifying laws, but the change that comes from modifying relationships. Trust is a strange thing. It is an extremely strange thing. If it works, it is seen as noble. But if trust does not work, it is seen as stupid, mortal. A politician, like a cricketer, can live with the image of a loser, but he cannot live with the title of Muttala. Losing is irreparable, forgivable, for it can be caused by factors beyond oneself, but stupidity is different. The stupid are the sole copyright holders of their talent. And I will not share with you the title that is used in India for a politician who is thought to be deficient in brains. It invokes a certain quadruped with long ears. The Sri Lankan experimenters with trust took the risk of being called exactly that and worse. Their only safety lay in that they were sharing that risk equitably and bravely between themselves. They were, let us make no mistake, who are present here today as the leaders of Sri Lanka, were being phenomenally brave. They were in fact taking a sabbatical from safe politics to do an internship in unsafe trust, not grabbing a chance but merging their own footprints with the unknown contours of fate. How many enter elections saying they will drop their prerogatives like an executive presidency? How many offer to change rules to their own detriment? As we can see, they have proved to be totally and indisputably right. Simple people, Lankans of all categories, linguistic, religious, political, coming from various occupations, representing the integrated will of their nationhood, chose a year ago, carefully but unambiguously, to affirm the hypothesis of trust for the nation's greatness. Not without courtesy, but with firmness, they held authoritarianism by the hand, took it to the outdoor, and said to it, "Poittu vaarungal, pasuvohevam hamuvemo. Piragu paakalam." They chose not to forget the past, but to take the sting out of it. They chose not to deny the differences, but to take the pathology of suspicion out of them. Not to deny discord, but make dismemberment obsolete. They chose, in other words, to pull the nation back from the brink of disaster. If destiny decided that mulle mullal dhaan edukka mudiyum, a thorn can only be removed by a thorn, it had also decided that once the thorn had done its work, another instrument, an instrument of healing, was needed. And it turned to the people of Sri Lanka to ponder the situation from all angles. Destiny in our times has to be a good democrat. It asks the people of Sri Lanka to choose between the thorn of conflict and the harvest of reconciliation, and they chose. Politics became thereby about the nation, not about political parties. In fact, about the nation as a civilization, and not the nation as a political formation. We are celebrating today the electoral intelligence of the people of Sri Lanka that drew out of the nation's politics a civilization, a shishtacharya, and a nagarikam. This day, therefore, is not as much about the completion of the first year of the government as it is about the relinquishing of power monopolies, of political prejudices, of suspicions, and of greed. The front line in the audience of gathering today that we see today is nothing short of a salutary and exemplary miracle. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, any Indian regards the giving of advice to be his birthright. In fact, his birth duty, his very mission. Whether in government or out of it, young or old, within India or abroad, Indians do not resist giving advice. Unsolicited, know-all, expert advice, prompted with the noblest of intentions and coming free. But in what a prodigious cataract it comes. Indiya Upadesha. But let me make it plain that what I propose to say today is only contextually different, not substantively, from what I would say with suitable modifications back home in India to myself and to my fellow citizens, to my own government. The people of Sri Lanka have done their work. It is now for the leaders to fulfill the expectations of the people. The government of national unity has 1,000 issues on its plate, including economic recovery, employment generation, the reinstating of the liberal apparatuses of a republic from the contortions to which they came to be subjected. It will give to all these issues its best attention. And I know of some of the extraordinary steps which Prime Minister Wickramasinghe is taking for SMEs and employment generation. But the primary defining foundational priority of a liberal republic has to be the retaining and consolidating of the trust between communities which have in the government reposed their trust and its determination to be wholly and actively fair in its attitude to them. Liberal Democrats in office have a difficulty. They have to be strong, but they cannot be bullies. They have to be firm, but they cannot be rigid. They have to follow the rules with those who made it their business to break those rules. They have to do right by the wronged without provoking the wrongdoers from doing more wrong. But most difficult of all, liberal Democrats, such as we have in the leadership today of Sri Lanka, the most difficult of all them is to be handsome and magnanimous with those who have been anything but with them. And this is a problem. Ladies and gentlemen, it is good to be smart, but it is smarter to be good in the long term. The difficulty is one lives not in the long term, but in the short term. And that short term is the arena for the illiberal undemocrat to do his little acts of violence to democracy, to republicanism, to civil liberties, human rights, and get away with several crimes, including murder. It does not behove a visitor celebrating this anniversary to say anything critical of a predecessor government and of the then leader, His Excellency Mahinda Rajapaksa. I will not be guilty of making that contretemps. Destiny chooses its agencies in mysterious ways, and there is no doubt that history will accord to the former President Rajapaksa a place of preeminence in its annals for his role in the turning of the world's most gruesome chapter of terror. But the massacre of innocents at its denouement has compacted the gore of terror with the bloodthirst of revenge. And the killing in cold blood of a child for the sole reason that he was his father's son has left the world in cold horror. It was therefore inevitable that when the bitter and fratricidal war ended in Sri Lanka, peace stayed out of sight. The guns fell silent, but dialogue also lost its voice. Velupillai Prabhakaran became history. But what about his goal? Has that goal become history too? Or has it only gone into hiding to reveal itself once again? Separatism may fall out of the immediate agenda, but as long as it lives as a simmering sentiment, it has not gone away. Let there be no doubt that a liberal renaissance phase has only that much of a tenure. The process of converting ideas into programs and programs into action and action into results is fraught with disappointment and delay. There are professional solution killers whose job it is to forage in the debris of chaos and indecision. They will find in the new setbacks, if any, or delays, if any, their playing field and their hope. They will find national unity inconvenient and unproductive. They will say to the great leaders of Sri Lanka today, oh, you are giving away too much, you are giving too soon. They will also say, you are trusting too much, you are trusting too many. They have their own field of vision, their own plans for advancement. which includes those tempting others who are not obstructionists to become obstructionists. India knows the type. They use to engineer legislative defections with finesse until an anti-defection law with no loopholes made it difficult for them. Nothing is impossible now for money. I do not know what may come from a cobra that mates with a viper. Perhaps nothing. But when money mates with power, the most abhorrent mutants result. They could be called genetically modified legislators. Sri Lanka cannot afford to be deflected by them or by anything or anyone from devolution, from inclusion, and from the more positive dimensions of these two. In a situation that calls for reparation, it is the one who needs reparation that must report satisfaction, not the reparation giver. The thirsty must announce the thirst's quenching, not the water dispenser. It is for the Lankan Tamil to acknowledge relief. It is not the relief giver to declare the work is done. It is, I know, as well all in this hall know, a fact that the insensitive thwarting of moderate Tamil Lankans' legitimate aspirations, decade after decade, by narrow ethno-linguistic nationalism, grew into the nightmare that ended with one of the world's most sanguinary wars. The Ponnambalams and the Chelvanayagams and the Tiruchelvams were men of vision. If the Ponnambalams and Chelvanayagams had not been disappointed and spurned and marginalized, Velupillai Prabhakaran would not have been required. We may not have those great leaders today, but we have in the Tamil leaders of Sri Lanka today, let us not forget, persons who have survived terror. Every Sri Lankan politician who has worked for a united Sri Lanka is a terror survivor by design or default. He is an Ascharya. The Tamil nationalist who has striven to find political solutions within a united Sri Lanka is a terror survivor many times over, an Elysium. The very presence of such a politician is a huge acknowledgement of the efficacy and strength of perseverance. The Tamil Lankan, who is a constitutionalist, a parliamentarian, and a believer in a united and just Sri Lanka, must not be disappointed and spurned. The old vicious cycle must not be repeated. An early and sincere meeting of Lankan Tamil aspirations is non-optional, for there is a historical imperative to those. Sri Lanka must do all it can to prevent new disappointments, new spurnings, new marginalizations, to lead to a revival of what may well be a revival of the goal which lurks in the Tamil Lankan diaspora's alienated mind. A return of vengeful violence in some second coming, with its hideous repression as a twin, would be disastrous as Sri Lanka moves into constitution making. And I compliment His Excellency the President for the great step that is going to be taken tomorrow in its proclamation. All that made the earlier constitutions vulnerable would have to be kept firmly out, and all that makes for the federal spirit within a unitary system strengthened. Here, the 1987 Indo-Sri Lanka Accord, much criticized in both countries, has in its long-term recommendations much which through Sri Lanka's 13A constitutional route remains valuable. There cannot be a better anchor for the ship of Sri Lanka's inclusive unity than the Indo-Lankan Accord, even as there can be no truer friend of a united Sri Lanka than a reassured India. Inclusivity, power sharing between the center and the periphery, and the deepening of democracy are imperative. But this cannot be done patronizingly. Who includes? The majority? No. Rationality does. Who gets included? The minority? No. Civil behavior does. The majority, which confers rights on a minority, remains dictatorial and overlord if it does what it does patronizingly. The majority which self-effaces everywhere except in the matter of seats in an elected House of Representatives is democratic, is Republican. Inclusion is more about tolerance and accommodation. It is even more than respect. It is about a civilization of the other, pride in the other. Politics becomes then a matter of culture, civilization culture. Nelson Mandela included in his first cabinet a large number of Indian South Africans, many people from his own party, the African National Congress. Perhaps His Excellency or Her Excellency, the High Commissioner for South Africa, is present here today. Many people asked Mandela, why do you have so many Indian South Africans in your cabinet, much more than their population demands? And Mandela said, the number of Indians in my cabinet is not proportionate to the population of the Indians in South Africa. It is proportionate to the contribution of the Indians to the struggle for the liberation. That is exactly what is required to make a nation a rainbow nation. If the cabinet size can go beyond prescribed limits to accommodate coalitions, it can also go beyond legal provisions to real-life action in order to accommodate trust. Accommodation, of which we have seen startling examples today. And I will take just 3 or 4 minutes more. Accommodation is what is really required. Why do as many Sinhala Lankans not speak Tamil? As many as Lankan Tamils speak Sinhala. Why should more Sinhala Lankans not see and share the wisdom of Colvin de Silva's famous all-time utterance? One language, 2 countries. 2 languages, 1 country. And N.M. Pereira's equally famous scoffing at the idea of one superior race. Why? Yeah, they. But ethnic fairness is never a one-way street. Mandela, to quote him again, said famously, and no surprise in that I am against white racism. There's no big deal in that. Mandela saying, I am against white racism, that is exactly right. But what made Mandela Mandela was when he said in the next sentence, I am against white racism and I am against black racism. A huge difference will be made to trust and trusting. If the Lankan Tamil were to say, I am against Sinhala racism, but I am also against Tamil racism. The Lankan Muslim and the Lankan Christian also need reassurances of trust, as do the plantation Tamil, especially the Tamil tea plucker, whom Professor Suryanarayana has characterized as Sri Lanka's Cinderella. And I must add also the unaffiliated Lankan dissenter and the independent Lankan iconoclast. The transition in Tamil Lankan positions from constitutional reform via constitutional means to separatism, via violent means to an ERM, via terrorism, was thought irreversible. That has changed. Negotiated change is now back on the table. It must not slumber there. And seeing President Sirisena and Prime Minister Wickramasinghe here today, I can be sure that it will not slumber there. Vengeance is only waiting to see how reform fares. Not just Sri Lanka, but the whole of South Asia, and in fact liberalism and pluralism everywhere require the success of the government of national unity's endeavor. For let us make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, and venerable sirs from the different religious traditions here, let us make no mistake. For if this opportunity given to Sri Lanka by the people of Sri Lanka is lost, it is unlikely ever to come again. I believe the opportunity has not come to be lost. Sri Lanka is not called Serendip for nothing. What is the difference between an island and a continent? An island is a small continent, and a continent is only a large island. Let no one think of Sri Lanka as a small island. In what Sri Lanka, in what you, ladies and gentlemen, in what you, the great leaders of Sri Lanka, have done in the last 1 year and more for building trust between communities, in cutting egos and trimming pride. Sri Lanka has shown itself to be large, larger than many a large country, including mine, India. An island of discord. Vesamavadaya Diviyana. For decades, Sri Lanka has become an island of hope and is meant to, destined to, and must become a continent of trust. And Nambikkai Kandam, Vishwasaya Mahadvipaya. I thank you.